Godzilla and Godzilla King of the Monsters gave us some seriously wild Titan throwdowns, like Godzilla going up against the winged Muto and the eight-legged one. Then we got King Ghidorah, Rodan, and of course, that epic showdown with Kong in Godzilla vs. Kong, followed by the two teaming up in the New Empire. But things might get even more insane in Godzilla 3. Legendary and Warner Brothers have been slowly building their MonsterVerse, their own shared universe full of classic Toho kaiju plus King Kong. Still, Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire felt more like a Kong movie than a Godzilla one, even though his name was right there in the title. That's got me thinking, Godzilla really needs his own third solo movie soon. He's got plenty of dangerous enemies from past stories that could make an awesome comeback. Toho's Godzilla movies have built up a seriously stacked lineup of monster opponents over the years. Starting way back in the 1960s, Godzilla has gone head-to-head with more than a dozen different kaiju, some so popular they've returned for multiple rounds, while others only popped up once. His monster brawling days kicked off in 1955 with Godzilla Raids Again, where he first clashed with Anguirus. Thanks to decades of movies, Godzilla's got one of the most iconic rogues galleries in cinema, but not every kaiju he fights is a straight-up villain. Sometimes, Godzilla's actually the one causing trouble, which is why creatures like Mothra and Baragon don't really count as villains, even though they've gone toe-to-toe with him before. A lot of these early fights end up setting the stage for future alliances. Monsters like Anguirus, Rodan, and Kumonga all started as enemies but later teamed up with Godzilla. That trend continued with Shimo in Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, where she turned on Scar King and helped save the day, hinting at a future as one of Godzilla's allies. Still, there are plenty of Godzilla's old foes who are just plain evil, and those are the ones who would make perfect villains for Godzilla 3. Let's start with Kamakuras, the giant praying mantis kaiju. These creepy crawlers first showed up in 1967's Son of Godzilla. They're not the biggest kaiju out there, but they've got a unique origin. Regular mantises mutated into monsters after a failed weather control experiment by the United Nations on Solgel Island. In that movie, the Kamakuras messed with Manila's egg, causing it to hatch early, and that didn't sit well with Godzilla. He basically stepped in as the protective dad, taking out two of the Kamakuras himself. The third one didn't last long either, getting caught in a web and finished off by Kumonga, the giant spider kaiju. Kamakuras later popped back up in Godzilla Final Wars, where Godzilla fought a version of it again. While Kamakuras probably wouldn't cut it as the main villain in Godzilla 3, there's definitely potential for a return, maybe as part of a side mission or mini-battle early in the movie. It'd be a fun callback to the classics, and the design could look awesome with today's effects. Imagine a swarm of them being used as cannon fodder. Next up is Ibra, the giant crab kaiju from Ibra Horror of the Deep. This low-budget film introduced Ibra as a sea monster who terrorized any ships that dared to enter his waters. Like a lot of other classic kaiju, Ibra was the result of nuclear radiation, mutated thanks to the shady actions of the terrorist group Red Bamboo. The Red Bamboo were the only ones who could safely sail near Ibra, since they developed a special chemical that repelled him. Everyone else? Crushed or wrecked. When Ibra finally came face-to-face with Godzilla, the fight wasn't exactly even. Godzilla ripped off Ibra's claws and pretty much wrecked him in classic monster beatdown style. Ibra could totally make a return in Godzilla 3, again, maybe not as the headliner villain, but as a cool aquatic threat in an ocean-based battle. Now we've got Gabara, the weirdest one of the bunch, and kind of a wild card in the Godzilla lineup. Gabara is the big green kaiju from All Monsters Attack, but here's the twist. He's not even real in the Godzilla universe. Gabara only exists in a kid's dream. The movie focuses on a lonely boy who escapes his rough life by dreaming he's on Monster Island, hanging out with Godzilla's son, Manila. Gabara represents the bully who picks on him in real life, so in the dream world, Gabara becomes the monster villain. Godzilla ends up beating Gabara, symbolizing the kid overcoming his fear and standing up for himself. Interestingly, Gabara was the only original monster created specifically for that movie. Everything else in the film was stock footage from earlier kaiju battles. Because Gabara is purely a dream monster, he's never shown up in any of the real Godzilla stories. But honestly, if Godzilla 3 wanted to get creative, a reimagined version of Gabara could totally work, maybe as a psychological threat or something from another dimension. Next up is Hedora, aka the Smog Monster, one of the most bizarre and unsettling kaiju Godzilla's ever faced. Introduced in Godzilla vs. Hedora, Hedora is basically a giant alien sludge blob that feeds on pollution. He came to Earth and thrived off the mess humanity made, growing stronger the more toxic waste and smog he absorbed. Hedora started off small, like a gross little tadpole, but quickly evolved into a hulking, oozing monster. He was tough for Godzilla to handle, not just physically, but because of what he represented. Hedora's body was full of acidic chemicals that actually burned Godzilla's skin, and even atomic breath didn't faze him much. The name Hedora comes from Hedoro, the Japanese word for sludge, which makes total sense considering he's basically living pollution. If Godzilla 3 wants to bring in a truly nasty villain with a deeper message, Hedora would be perfect. With today's growing concern over the environment, reintroducing him could hit hard. Picture an updated Hedora feeding off oil spills, factory waste, and climate disasters, and Godzilla being forced to evolve new strategies just to survive. Now let's talk about Biolante, easily one of the most unique and underrated monsters in the Godzilla universe. She showed up in Godzilla vs. Biolante and had a seriously wild origin story. She was created from a mix of Rose DNA, Godzilla's DNA, and the cells of a deceased girl. Yeah, it's as weird as it sounds, but also kind of tragic. Biolante was this massive plant-like kaiju with a mouth full of sharp teeth and vines that could trap and stab her enemies. She was way bigger than Godzilla at the time, and her powers were seriously next level. What made her even more interesting was that she still had the soul or consciousness of the scientist's daughter, making her a rare blend of beauty, horror, and heartbreak. Despite being a fan favorite, Biolante hasn't appeared in live action since, which is a shame. If she returned in Godzilla 3, it could be epic, especially with today's visual effects. Well, that's it for today. Which monster do you want to see Godzilla face off against next? Biolante, Destoroyah, or someone else entirely? Drop your pick in the comments, and let's geek out over some kaiju mayhem together. And hey, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future MonsterVerse updates. Catch you in the next one.